Every few weeks, somebody messages me some version of the same complaint. They switch to residential proxies. They're paying real money for a rotating pool, and they're still getting hit with a CAPTCHA wall on every third request. Their first instinct is always the same. Something's wrong with the proxies. 9 times out of 10, that's the wrong diagnosis. The question itself comes from a bad model of what the CAPTCHA is actually checking. One where the IP address gets treated as the entire signal, when for most modern anti-bot systems, the IP is just one input on a much longer list. I run proxy farms for a living. Real hardware, real SIM cards, real mobile carrier connections, feeding scrapers that run around the clock, day in and day out. I've watched thousands of requests get waved through, and thousands more get walled off, sometimes on the exact same IP pool within the same hour. So this isn't theory to me, it's what I see in the logs every week, and the thing I keep having to explain to people is that a clean IP buys you less than they think it does, and it was never supposed to buy you everything. The original idea behind CAPTCHA, back in the early 2000s, was simple enough: show a visual or audio puzzle that a computer supposedly couldn't solve but a human could breeze through. That premise has been quietly falling apart for years now. Modern optical character recognition and image classifiers can chew through plenty of the classic distorted text puzzles and image grid challenges at success rates that make the puzzle itself almost beside the point. The companies building these systems know this. That's exactly why the puzzle you see on screen today is often a side effect of the check, not the check itself. Systems like reCAPTCHA version 3, hey-CAPTCHA's invisible mode, and Cloudflare's turnstile mostly run silently in the background. You never see them working. They only surface a visible challenge when the background score comes back ambiguous, when the system genuinely can't tell yet whether you're a person or a script. So before a single puzzle image ever loads on your screen, a whole scorecard has already been built up around your session. And that scorecard is what actually decides whether you sail through, get a light challenge, or get the hard one. Think about what's actually going into that scorecard. Mouse movement and scroll behavior on the page, or more tellingly, the total absence of any mouse movement at all. The timing between your actions, your keystrokes, how long you pause between clicking one thing and the next. Because real humans are messy and inconsistent in a way that's surprisingly hard to fake convincingly. Your browser fingerprint gets checked too, screen size, installed fonts, the exact way your canvas and WebGL rendering comes out, whether your time zone actually lines up with your locale and your IP's geolocation. Then there's the stuff most people never think about at all. The TLS and HTTP handshake itself carries a fingerprint that reveals what client library is actually making the request, completely independent of whatever your user agent header claims to be. You can tell a request, "I am Chrome on a Windows laptop" all day long, but if the handshake underneath looks like a bare Python script, the system already knows. Cookie history and session history get weighed in too, including whether this particular browser has ever successfully passed the challenge before on this site. And only after all of that, the IP reputation gets folded in. Is this address sitting inside a known data center range? Has it been tied to recent abuse anywhere? How many other sessions have touched this exact address in the last hour? That's the full picture, and the IP is genuinely just one line on it. So when somebody tells me the CAPTCHA caught my scraper, what actually happened underneath is that several of those signals lined up together and painted a picture that looked automated. And the IP was one small piece of that puzzle, not the whole thing. Here's where the idea of a proxy as a silver bullet really falls apart. And it's something I see play out constantly running production scraping infrastructure day to day. A residential or mobile IP does tell the target site something genuinely useful. It says this traffic exited from a real consumer network rather than a rack in a data center. And that matters because data center ranges get flagged hard by default. But that IP only answers one question on a much longer checklist, and the rest of the checklist doesn't care what your IP looks like. Take a pool of completely legitimate mobile carrier IPs, rotating correctly, doing everything right on the network layer. If the client sitting behind that pool is a bare HTTP library firing off identical headers on every single request, with zero delay variance, hitting 20 pages in 3 seconds flat, that pool still gets walled off with challenge pages. The IP reputation was fine. The behavior on top of it screams script, and the detection system doesn't need the IP to figure that out. Now swap the client. Same exact IP pool, no changes there at all. but replace the bare HTTP library with a properly configured headless browser running human-like timing, natural pauses, some variance between requests. The challenge rate drops noticeably. The IP didn't change one bit. The behavior did, and that's the whole lesson in one comparison. The same thing runs the other direction too, and it's worth sitting with. Take a genuinely well-built browser automation setup, human-like timing, realistic mouse movement, a convincing fingerprint, running through a data center IP that's already sitting on an abuse list somewhere. That setup still gets walled off because the IP's bad reputation is doing the talking before the request's actual behavior even gets evaluated. Neither layer alone is enough. The network layer and the behavior layer both have to be clean at the same time, or the whole thing falls apart at whichever layer is weak. None of this means proxies are pointless, so let me be clear about what they actually do well, because it's a real and necessary layer, just not a complete one on its own. The first thing a good proxy pool buys you is IP reputations. A data center IP that's been shared across thousands of other scrapers accumulates a bad reputation fast, and that reputation follows every request sent from it, including yours, even if you personally have done nothing wrong at all. Residential and mobile IPs generally start from a much better reputation baseline because real consumer connections sit behind them. The second thing proxies genuinely help with is spreading out request volume. Most rate limiting on a site side looks at request frequency per IP or per subnet. Rotating across a genuinely diverse pool spreads that load so no single address looks like it's carrying the full weight of a scraper's request volume by itself. I want to be precise about what this actually buys you though. It's about staying under a threshold that trips an alarm. It is not about being invisible, and it never was. The third thing is matching your IP's geolocation to whatever your other headers claim about you. If your browser fingerprint says a device sitting in Singapore, but the IP you're routing through resolves to a data center in Frankfurt, that mismatch itself is a signal detection systems specifically check for. A proxy that geographically lines up with the rest of your setup closes that one particular gap, and it's a real gap worth closing. What proxies flatly cannot do is fabricate consistent human-shaped behavior for you. They can't fix a TLS handshake that fingerprints straight back to a scraping library no matter what headers you slap on top of it. They can't build session history that looks like a real returning user because that kind of history only gets built over time, request by request, the honest way. All of that lives in the request layer and the client layer, not the network layer, and no amount of IP rotation reaches up into those other layers to fix them. So what does an honest, defensible setup actually look like? I'm not going to lay out a bypass playbook here, and not just because it's not what this channel is for. It genuinely wouldn't hold up anyway, since these detection systems change constantly. But a few principles are worth stating plainly. Respect robots.txt and the site's terms of service. If a site has explicitly said scraping isn't permitted, or gated data behind the login and the paywall, that's the line, full stop. Changing your IP doesn't change what you're actually permitted to access. Rate limit yourself on purpose, deliberately, as a design choice rather than an afterthought. Don't lean on a big proxy pool to absorb request volume you wouldn't dream of sending from a single connection if you are behaving like a reasonable human visitor. Match your pacing to what a real user session would actually look like. Pauses and all, and keep your total load on any one target at a level that's genuinely reasonable, not just technically survivable. Use the official APE where one exists. A lot of sites that get scraped heavily actually publish a documented APE for the exact same data, complete with clear rate limits and clear terms you agree to upfront. It's slower to set up. It's less flexible than scraping the rendered page directly. But it's the difference between operating with permission and operating around a wall that somebody built on purpose. And that difference matters more than the extra setup time. Treat the CAPTCHA challenge as information, not as an obstacle you route around with bigger tooling. If your traffic keeps consistently triggering challenges on a given target, that target is telling you directly that your current pattern reads as automated to them. The correct response is to reconsider that pattern. Slow down, add realistic variance, or in some cases just stop scraping that particular target. The wrong response is escalating your tooling over and over until the challenges stop showing up, because that's not solving the actual problem. It's just hiding it temporarily. And don't scrape personal data or anything sitting behind authentication you don't legitimately hold yourself. This should go without saying, but it's genuinely the most common way a scraping project turns into a legal problem instead of a technical one. The technical problems are the ones you can debug with logs and patience. The legal ones don't go away because you found a better proxies. I want to say this part directly because it's really the whole point of everything above. No proxy provider, no rotation strategy, no fingerprinting tool makes a scraper undetectable or guarantees it won't get blocked, ever, full stop. Anyone telling you otherwise is selling you something, and you should walk away from that conversation. Detection is a moving target maintained by teams whose entire job, every single day, is closing exactly these kinds of gaps. Whatever technique works cleanly today has a real chance of getting patched next month, or next week, or tomorrow. So the realistic goal for anyone running scrapers professionally was never unblockable. It's operating within reasonable, respectful bounds, using infrastructure that doesn't stack unnecessary red flags on top of whatever's already sitting there in your request. Understanding what a CAPTCHA is actually scoring won't make your scraper invincible, and I'm not pretending it will. What it will do is stop you from wasting money assuming your IP pool is broken when the real problem is sitting somewhere else entirely in your stack. And it'll help you build something that behaves closer to what these systems were designed to let through in the first place. A reasonable, rate-appropriate visitor doing reasonable things. I run the proxies behind real scrapers myself. The full written guides and the proxy setups I actually use are at proxyscraping.org. And if you want more breakdowns on how proxy types, rotation, and scraping tools actually behave in production, that's exactly where the rest of it lives. Full written guides and tested proxy picks at proxyscraping.org. Go check it out, and subscribe if this kind of breakdown is useful to you.